Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dying time is here. That's right, we're talking 1994's Wolf on Kill by Kill. Well, greetings and salutations, Internet. Your old pal, Patrick Hamilton, coming to you once again from upstate New York. My God, it's beautiful up here. This is the Kill by Kill podcast, where we are dedicated to celebrating the least discussed component of any horror film, the characters. We're going to unpack all the goriest details, which are not nearly as gory as you might think, of Mike Nichols' 1994 werewolf classic, Wolf, in the hopes that a recently dismissed publishing impresario's death is just the beginning of the jokes that we can make at his expense. And as always, there's only one person I trust, that if I find a couple spare fingers in my pocket, she'll help me dispose of them. The one, the only, Gina Radcliffe. How are you doing today, Gina?
I'm good. I'm really pleased because this might be the most classiest movie we've ever talked about on Kill by Kill.
Oh, for sure.
A-list stars, Mike fucking Nichols directing.
Yes.
I mean, come on.
Yeah,
it's and because of that, it's a horror movie that wants very much to not be a horror movie.
It's the horror of being a middle-aged, publishing exec who might be undercut by a younger man in the office.
Who is definitely boning his wife. Definitely.
And probably doing a great job of it from what we can tell.
I don't know. It's James Spader. I don't get the impression that James Spader's a generous lover.
All right, let's not impugn his sterling reputation of being a sensitive and thinking person's lover, which I'm sure someone has of him. But I don't want to alarm you, Gina. Turns out we are not alone. That's right. We have a special guest. He's a writer, he's a filmmaker, and in my opinion, he's one of the premier video essayists on all of YouTube, and that's literally saying something. The one, the only, Patrick H. Willems. How are you doing today, Patrick?
Hello, I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. It is an absolute, genuine pleasure to have you with us. I think you are, without a doubt, one of the smartest voices on YouTube, especially when it comes to movies. In and above that, I think you're fantastic at what you do, and it's a genuine pleasure to have you on board.
Wow, thank you so much.
You were ranting, raving, clawing at the digital framework of Twitter a few weeks back about this new movie that you had not seen before, 1994's Wolf. And I immediately said, well, if you ever want to talk about Jack Nicholson eating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich on camera, would you consider doing it with us? And to my surprise, you agreed. Why would you do something so silly?
I just couldn't say no. I should say the great timing of this is that I was watching the movie as research for a video, which I literally released last night. So the video partly deals with Wolf, and now I get to talk more about it. But I wanted to come on the show because as soon as you presented this, what I'd been thinking about after I watched this movie was, why doesn't everyone talk about this movie all the time? I'd never seen it before, and it is so wild and so interesting that I could not shut up about it. And so any excuse to talk about Wolf, I'm there.
As Gina had noted, this is a Mike Nichols movie, and I don't know that I would, if you would put a gun to my head and asked, what is the supernatural movie that Mike Nichols had made? Even though I had seen this in the movie theater and quite enjoyed it, my first guess of what that movie would have been was Day of the Dolphin, which has the world's best tagline on its movie poster. He unwittingly trained a dolphin to kill the president of the United States. Unwittingly.
When are we going to cover that movie?
I don't know. But I don't know if it will ever rise to the occasion of the movie poster.
Is that Day of the Dolphin? Is Day of the Dolphin Mike Nichols' only foray into any kind of genre film before this? Because I feel like he pretty much exclusively did comedies and dramas. Like when we think Mike Nichols, we think obviously The Graduate, or like Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, Catch-22, Heartburn, The Birdcage, like any of those. Like, this is such an outlier in his filmography.
Yes, it's way out there. I mean, he's got relationship dramas and he's got comedies that, weave in drama in and out of them, but they're centered. They're very earthbound. And then after Regarding Henry, but before The Birdcage, he's like, you know what? I got to get this Jack Nicholson werewolf movie out of my head.
I just wish I knew that the story, apparently Elaine May did some of the work on this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, she and Mike Nichols obviously have like a very long history. And then she wrote The Birdcage. Or did she write Primary Colors?
Well, I know she was involved in Primary Colors because that was one of the films that I was forced to sit through when I worked at Universal Studios as a tour guide in 1998.
She wrote The Birdcage and she wrote Primary Colors.
Yeah.
So they kind of, and I was doing because I was making this video, I was doing research into Wolf, and apparently Wolf was the first time they'd collaborated in like 35 years. Because obviously they'd been like a comedy duo like decades earlier, and I wonder if this was like the catalyst for those like late 90s collaborations.
It was a modest hit. It doesn't really have any, it's not one of those movies people fondly look back on from the 90s. It's like, I saw that once, but it's just so, it doesn't look like anything either of them would have done. There's like no, and again, this isn't to denigrate the movie. I enjoy it, but there's just no, it's kind of a generically written and directed movie, but just written by people who don't know a lot about horror movies.
No, and I think that's almost to its benefit because it doesn't decide to fall into some of the tropes that you would expect from it. It's weirdly enough.
It also kind of has a happy ending, which is unexpected.
Yeah, well, they're both them wolves together now, and now they can trounce through the forest, breaking deer's necks whenever they damn well please.
Well, to be fair, I mean, it's other than the occasionally having to maul people, they don't make looking like a werewolf. They don't make a werewolf look like a bad gig.
No. I mean, honestly, Will Randall's life kind of improves in a lot of ways.
He grows his hair back.
He does.
I never get tired of that gimmick. They just did it in What We Do in the Shadows. I never get tired of the he's growing more powerful. Look, he has a beautiful head of hair now.
It's great. But actually, I will say one thing. I'm going through Mike Nichols' filmography, and I had completely forgotten that he directed Working Girl. 6 years earlier, and thing is like that. It was one of the big movies from the 80s about like New York City corporate culture, and this is entirely set in a similar world. It just kind of tosses in this supernatural element. So he's kind of dealt with some similar stuff before.
Yes. Well, weirdly enough, Regarding Henry kind of has that same thing, where Harrison Ford in that movie is this go-getter in the jungles of New York City up until the point he gets a bullet in the head. And then that magically transforms him into a wonderful guy who's just a little bit simple to hang around with. So weirdly enough, this movie parallels that, where instead of becoming in touch with your emotions because you got shot in the head, you become in touch with your animalistic side and the part of you that might be the alpha by getting bitten in the middle of Vermont by a wolf.
I mean, who among us?
It happens to the best of us.
You can't plan on it. You just have to embrace it when it happens. You were talking a little bit about Elaine May doing some of the writing, obviously doing some punch up here, because I don't know that I've ever seen like Wesley Strick's sterling wit necessarily. I think he's a pretty serviceable screenwriter and story craft maker.
I think Jim Harrison was like the main writer on this.
Yeah. And then I wonder what Strick's function is, because obviously he did enough to get a screenplay credit alongside of him. So I wonder if that's more structure or plot or what he added to the mix, but you can definitely tell that someone has punched up the jokes. Because there are moments here that are too fucking witty for its own good to a degree. Like there's that. First of all, it's wonderful to see Prunella Scales in anything. I just love saying Prunella over the top. But she has that little scene where she goes, "What's left on my contract for writing books?" And he's like, "Oh, it can be anything." And she goes, "Well, how about an 80-page reminiscent of all the restaurants I've loved?" And he goes, "Oh, well, there's no specifications on your contract." And she goes, "Good, I'll start eating out right now." That's a funny joke.
Yes.
That's good writing where someone knows how to find the structure of something and make it pop. And that feels very Elaine May to me.
It's funny. So I had never actually seen any of the movies Elaine May directed. And today, since I wrapped up a video and have some free time again, I decided literally this morning, like, you know what? I think that'll be the next filmmaker that I catch up on. And so this afternoon, I watched A New Leaf.
Yeah.
Which is really good, and it is a New York City set comedy. And so looking at that and then looking at Wolf again, I've seen other movies that she wrote, but just between these two, I can immediately see, okay, I see what she contributed. Like this is her wheelhouse.
Yeah, there's definitely like the parallel, the older character, the kind of aging character being threatened in his position by the sly younger character, which is an evergreen trope in movies like this, particularly movies placed in like the New York corporate culture.
Sure.
Like I don't know why anybody ever trusts their proteges, because they're always going to stab you in the back.
That's right. That's why I only have one protege. He just turned 10, and he's very into My Hero Academia. So I think it's going to turn out well. Yeah,
the best advice you can take from these movies is never help anyone.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, it really makes sense. I was so happy, and I'd just forgotten it up until I rewatched the movie, that David Hyde Pierce is in this.
Oh, there's a whole bunch. David Hyde Pierce is in it. David Schwimmer pops up in it for like
as
12 seconds. Allison Janney is a party guest.
Okay, wait. So Patrick, I have to ask you.
Sure.
When you introduced the show, you said you're in upstate New York.
Yeah, I guess this is just outside of the city. It's not really.
No. But wait. Oh, sorry. I thought you meant you specifically were.
No, he does. That's how we intro everything wherever the movie takes place.
Okay.
During Friday the 13th, I was in Crystal Lake, and
okay. I'm sorry, because I am currently in literally upstate New York, and I was going to mention that. Yeah, David Hyde Pierce. He's the most famous person from my hometown in upstate New York.
There you go. He just radiates in this. Well, there's a weird kind of youthful energy to the background players here, where he's very smartly, obviously, like dipping into the New York theater scene, because that's where he must have snagged Allison Janney. And Hyde Pierce has that one scene with Jack Nicholson where Nicholson sort of reveals his newly thought up grand plan to regain his senior editor position at the publishing house. And he basically goes, "You are my god." Thank you. David Hyde Pierce showed up to play. Everyone here shows up to play, but I don't think they go into Banana Town so much outside of Spader. Spader, at the end of the movie, practically has a cartoon mustache to twirl and a dog that laughs like Muttley.
And he needs a top hat. That's literally all he needs. But I mean, come on, this is God love man. This is him in every performance. As soon as even if I hadn't seen this movie before, even if I hadn't reviewed the plot on Wikipedia, soon as Spader shows up, he's gonna fuck him out of his job. He's less convincing as a good guy in a movie than like the whole time I'm watching Stargate, I'm like, he's just gonna he's just gonna betray the entire team, isn't he?
Well, this is what I love about Spader in this movie, because for so much of the movie, he's just this piece of shit who acts like his friend, and then behind him is like doing everything he can to just like take over his life and like take away and just like he has like no morals. He's doing anything to get ahead, and but he always, like in every single scene with Nicholson, he's always like apologizing and like being really deferential to him, and still acting like they're friends. And so the huge shift in the third act to me was so delightful, because it's the opposite of what he's been doing the whole time. You basically get two Spader performances in one movie.
The scene in the police station, which we get the third act Richard Jenkins reveal that he's in this movie.
God love him. I love him. I love him. I will watch him in anything.
He's fantastic, and apparently he was born 45 years old. I can't tell.
He's like Ed Harris.
Yeah, he just came out of the womb, but he already had a job that's kind of bringing him down. There are several. He's
born wearing a short sleeve dress shirt.
Just born going, when is lunch again? They're waiting to be interviewed by Richard Jenkins, and Spader he kind of corners Michelle Pfeiffer. At one point, he's fantastic in this movie. But then right before he's let in, he decides to nuzzle her womb goodbye.
I think he's like smelling her.
Yes.
Sure.
That's how I read it.
And it's really creepy. But I mean, we get this, it's sort of, telegraphed that this is how he's going to be, because this expert on wolves that Jack Nicholson goes to talk with at some point talks about that, if you get bitten by the wolf, it'll only be bad if you're a bad person. And I'm like, that's a new twist on werewolf lore. But on the other hand, nobody ever uses the word werewolf.
No,
it's funny. It's like the very concept of it doesn't exist in this universe. It's just you will turn into a wolf, not you're a half man, half wolf. But of course it's going to be. I mean, I assume that's why he turned into, by James Spader's character, turned into the more animalistic wolf faster than Jack Nicholson did, because it's digging into the worst parts of his personality, which is all of him. Which is every cell in his body is just awful and terrible.
I mean, it's so obvious to everyone who's in a scene with him how bad he is, and yet he's constantly kept around. Like, Christopher Plummer invites him into his home after he's been fired by Jack Nicholson. They're just sitting on the couch with one another, watching the news.
Just chilling.
And he's like, well, would the job be open if he was like, convicted of murder?
I'm just asking. I hope he isn't. I really, really hope he isn't. Wink, 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 wink.
But, like, if it happened, could I sneak in there a little bit? And Christopher Plummer is like, this, like, how bad are you at this? You're not subtle at all.
I mean, that's Spader's like great ability in this movie, just sucking up to people. Like, what I love about him is when Nicholson confronts him, even after he's learned that he went behind his back to take his job and is having an affair with his wife, Spader still, like, you'd think at that point Spader would just kind of like very much come clean and just be like, all right, like, yes, I'm trying, like, I don't like you, I am being a dick, but he still just keeps apologizing and just like, like acting like look, I fucked up. I'm sorry. What can I do to make this right? Like he still keeps trying to be a nice guy, even though like we know that he isn't. And that's what I love about it. He keeps up the act constantly.
Yeah.
I have the movie in front of me right now, and I'm just looking at him in the police station scene with his contacts in.
Nobody comments on. He's got these like glowing golden eyes, and everybody's like, yeah, all right.
It's insane.
That's nothing to be concerned about.
Everything is to be concerned about.
He's got these like he's growing these wonderful mutton chops. I love it. I love the look. I love every bit of it.
He sort of becomes the combination of Wolverine and Willy Loman at one point.
Yes. Okay, so I have a question for both of you.
Sure.
So you both said you saw this movie in theaters, right?
Yes.
Okay.
That old.
So I'm not. I promise I'm not trying to like talk about anyone's ages here. I'm just
No, we're
curious.
old. We're old. It's fine.
Please, young people have to keep a Wikipedia open just to listen to this show. It's for the olds.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So, because this is a movie, so I said that I've never seen this until a few weeks ago, but it's a movie that I remember seeing the poster for it when I was a kid. And I knew it's like, this is a movie for adults. Like, I'm not going to be allowed to see it, but I was just like, I liked monster stuff. And I knew who Jack Nicholson was because he was the Joker in Batman.
Right.
And so I remember like asking my parents about it, just like, so have you seen it? Do you? And I always wanted to know like how much, like what does he look like as a wolf? Like how far does the wolf transformation go? But I had never seen the movie, and so I only knew it from like the poster and TV spots. So what was your take on it at the time, and what did people think of this movie?
Well, I'll speak for myself. I saw it with a group of friends at a Cineplex Odeon, and I think the reflection upon leaving the theater was, well, that was fun. I don't know that I don't know what I thought it would be, but what it comes off as is urbane. It's the sort of on the same track as the Kurt Siodmak original Universal Wolfman, in that he's this landed gentry who's kind of come back into town, and his dad's like, listen, this isn't the life for you. Go back to America. You got problems. And he just happens to get bitten by a wolf and things fly off the rails. And here you have someone who's basically the dad in the original Universal Werewolf, and his middle-aged problems sort of get solved by becoming a werewolf. And amongst my friends and everything, it was like, well, that was fun, and everyone looks pretty, and Michelle Pfeiffer is a knockout on screen, and it's always fun to watch Jack Nicholson give devil brow, but I don't know that it changed our lives necessarily. But it also wasn't, oh well, that was terrible, they don't know what they're doing. It was like a nice thing that happened, but I don't know that it pushed the cultural barriers of 1994 for me. What about you, Gina?
Well, at the risk of repeating myself, I've mentioned a few times that this came out in a period in which I was going to the movies probably about 2 to 3 times a week. So I wasn't as discerning as I would have normally been. Now, that's not to say that I wouldn't have gone to see this if I had to be more judicial about my time and my money. And of course, this is the wonderful time when you could see an evening movie for $5 maybe.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have said it would have been on my top 10 of 94, but it wasn't bad. I enjoyed it. But the problem is that my favorite horror movie is An American Werewolf in London. So I have very high standards for werewolf movies, and I like my werewolves to be tragic. Mm-hmm. I like my werewolf movies to have the actual body morphing, which this does. You compare them to Wolverine, they look. I mean, yeah. By the end, Spader's got the ears, and he's kind of a little more further into transition than Jack Nicholson, which I thought was an interesting touch. Yeah. But if I was comparing it to that, to American Werewolf, I would have found it lacking. But it's fine. I would say it's a platonic ideal of an it's fine movie.
Okay, I was really curious just because this is a movie that, like, I didn't know what people would expect from this, because as we've talked about already, it's like kind of a horror movie, but it doesn't really want to be a horror movie. And so I can imagine people going to see it being really disappointed that it was kind of more about the culture at this publishing company than actual like werewolf mythology. But for me going into this, seeing it now, like this is a movie that not only would not be made now, would not even be made like 5 years after it was made.
Yeah.
And this is like the idea of Sony Pictures spending at $70 million on this is, I believe, I did the research for this video. I believe this might have been the second most expensive movie of 94.
Oh, wow.
Really?
This cost more than twice as much as Speed.
No shit. I mean,
Yeah.
I guess it went. I guess it went mostly into the makeup effects.
Also it like went over budget. They like reshot, I think, like all the ending and all of that. But still, it's like I believe the only movie in '94 that cost more than this was True Lies, which was the most expensive movie of all time when it was made. And so the idea that this existed, that Sony spent more money than on any other movie that year on a werewolf movie with Jack Nicholson that's really like kind of a satire about New York corporate culture, like that's their most expensive movie of the year, like that would not happen again. And so for me watching this now, this is like a beautiful window into a time when a thing like this could exist, because I'm seeing it so out of the context that it arrived in. And I think that's part of why I enjoyed it so much, because I'm like, I can't believe this is a real thing. A studio spent money on this. They let Mike Nichols and company do this. Like Jack Nicholson decided this will be my next project. Yeah. It's like everything, like as much as I do genuinely like the movie, I think it's good. But what I enjoy pretty much as much as the movie is just the mere fact that it exists.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, and we mention that a lot in the movies we talk about. Is we're just glad to have had the experience of watching it, because it's just so of its own thing. But yeah, I did not know that was the second highest budget. I mean, the makeup effects are. I mean, I have to assume quite a bit of that went to paying the cast.
Rick Baker. He's good.
Yeah. I mean,
it's not like they're building an animatronic werewolf that's like standing on someone's shoulders, and there's a lot of gizmos going on. I honestly think a lot more of that money was location shooting and building the set where Michelle Pfeiffer lives and the barn, because that definitely looks like you made that inside of a sound stage, and it's huge. It's gigantic. It's big enough to have horses, and they're launching people in werewolf makeup into the air on top of people. I feel like it was that ending, trying to cap that off, because I can't imagine, and just the top line cost of paying Jack Nicholson. Like, right. After Batman, he essentially could do whatever he damn well pleased.
Yeah, because it wasn't didn't he at the time make more money for Batman than any actor had ever made for a movie?
Yes, I think it took until Robert Downey Jr. doing his Marvel contract,
yes,
and earning back end on every Marvel movie for someone to actually make more.
Right. Okay. And since you brought this up, can we just talk about Jack Nicholson?
Sure, let's.
Because as I was watching this movie and enjoying every single thing he was doing, every moment he's on screen, and I've loved Jack Nicholson since I was like, I don't know, 4 or 5 years old, whenever I first saw Batman. But watching this, I was like, is this guy like the greatest actor of all time? Is there anyone that I enjoy watching more than this person? Because he always, I mean, he's great in everything. He always delivers. And this movie, again, it's so goddamn strange. And it's also funny, and he's playing the kind of character he doesn't usually play. Like when you think Jack Nicholson as a werewolf, you go, oh yeah, of course that makes sense. But then when you like actually look at the character more, he's playing just like a middle-aged guy who's like very ordinary in a way that he doesn't usually play. Like, he's the guy, like you get him to play the Joker, you get him to play the devil in The Witches of Eastwick. He's that kind of guy. He doesn't usually play a regular guy who like works in an office.
No. Yeah, he definitely made a choice to underplay this role. And I think that was good, because he's not the villain. And so there's no reason for him to be super over the top.
And unlike a lot of his characters, he is afraid of the thing he's becoming. While he embraces certain elements of it, once he discovers that it's not just that he can smell tequila on the guy in the office that he doesn't like's breath, but also that he might be eating people in Central Park, he's genuinely affected by that. He doesn't want to become this. You think you're going to get this transformation of milquetoast Jack Nicholson into Jack Nicholson with werewolf teeth in. And what you actually get is a journey of a character that isn't quite Jack Nicholson, with just glimmers of that coming through here and there. It's a very controlled performance.
Yeah, because you would think, just based on the premise, that, okay, he becomes like, he has like a massive transformation. We've seen plenty of movies before where something happens to someone, often like supernatural, and then suddenly, they're dressing differently. Like, okay, you could see this being like Peter Parker in Spider-Man 3.
Okay, sure, yeah.
Like, you could easily see it becoming that. When everyone's what happened to you? Like, why are you acting like this and dressing like this? And it's much more subtle than that. Like, it's like he becomes a bit more confident, but it's not a wild change.
What I took from it as it was somebody snapping out of a depression.
Yeah,
like
that's really good.
He's been depressed for a while. Maybe he kind of senses something's going on, more the wife than he realizes. And then, he just feels better, and he's getting more work done. He's getting more sleep, and he looks a little better. And, but yeah, you're right. There's no scene where he's like strutting down the street and like, hitting on ladies or anything like that. He's kind of, makes direct beeline for Michelle Pfeiffer, and that's about it. That's the only person he's interested in.
Yeah.
And even with her, he's very respectful of her. She's to the point where she doesn't know what to make of it. And the one issue I do have with the movie, and again, I do like it. I do think it's a very, well-made movie. I think it could have done with maybe 35% less slow motion. But that's
sure.
But that's fine. That's an artistic choice that they made, and I'll let them have it. I wish that they knew what to do with Michelle Pfeiffer's character.
Yes,
because she's obviously a bad rich girl who has gotten into some sort of unspecified trouble in the past. She doesn't get along with the dad. She knows how to break out of handcuffs, which is implausible. But and she's like. He keeps telling her, well, I'm turning into this thing. She's like, oh, are you? That's kind of hot. And then when it turns out, no, really, I'm turning into this thing. She's like, no, not like that. And it's like, and I just wish they kind of were a little more consistent with how her character was written.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm totally with you. I mean, the weird thing about this movie is that Michelle Pfeiffer is in it playing that role at this point in her career.
Yeah.
Because, so this is 2 years post Batman Returns. So she's at this point like a huge major movie star. And I mean, she's like right there on the poster. She's like bigger on the poster than Nicholson is. But at the same time, her role is so much smaller. I don't have like an immediate solution for this because he is obviously like the focus of the entire movie, but she doesn't have a ton to do for a character who clearly has like an interesting past life. She's kind of the scenes between them are interesting, but I don't think they take full advantage of what that character could be, and especially what Pfeiffer could do with the part, really kind of until like the final scene when she shows up in like the black turtleneck and she looks amazing. And
where she transforms back into Catwoman a little bit.
Exactly. And you see her right there, and something like immediately I'm like, I know this is the end of the movie, but I just want to like see more of her like this. Because it's like she like lives up to all her potential, and then the movie ends.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that if she had kind of encouraged him to get more in touch with his animal side, and I don't mean that in like a gross way or anything. I mean literally, sort of encouraging him to let that part of him out. Yeah. Then that would have been a little more consistent with how her character was written. But it's like, well, first she's trying to protect him from the cops, and then she's like, oh wait, no, he might have actually done it. Well, now I'm going to hide him. Well, now I need to run away. Well, now I need to call the police again. It's just, listen, it seemed like they kind of came to an impasse as to what to do with her.
Okay, I mean, I'm going to throw out a potentially not good idea, but it just popped into my head. Because 2 years after this movie, James Spader makes David Cronenberg's Crash, which is a movie about people with weird sexual interests.
Yeah.
I'll just put it that way. They could, I don't think this is a Mike Nichols thing, but another director, probably Cronenberg, could have done a version of this movie where she's like way too interested in his like wolf aspects, and they really push the weird sort of like, animalistic sexuality part further. Just a thought about. I'm not saying I want this movie to have like bestiality or anything like that.
No, I think you're pretty much saying that.
I think they wanted to do. I think they flirted with that idea, but then they weren't. They didn't want to go that far.
It's kind of there, but for like, I mean, like they do end up having a sexual relationship. Like they do get together, but it is also for a movie that is like for adults. All of that like happens off screen.
Yes, they're not interested in making that a reality that you need to see. It's just
right.
Like, if they had a fireplace to tilt towards and do a fade dissolve into, they would have done it.
Well,
exactly.
Well, all that like tasteful distancing, it makes it more jarring when like James Spader shows up and tells her he's gonna fuck her to death. It's like I'm like, what? did I read my caption right? You take my glasses off, put it back on.
Exactly, and just to sort of clarify, kind of. What I was like attempting to articulate, just considering like her character's past and the kind of men she seems to, and then she says that she's been attracted to. I feel like they're like one potential route for this movie to have taken, if it had wanted to, is to play up like him becoming his aggression becoming more heightened and just like more emphasized, and her being interested in that, and then him potentially like questioning how he feels about this side of himself. But again, it doesn't really delve as deeply into her character as they should, and as I would like to see.
I think she probably signed on to it because Jack Nicholson is going to do a movie and they want you in it. She's like, well, why wouldn't I want to be in a Jack Nicholson movie? Oh, by the way, the person directing it is Mike Nichols. Well, why the hell wouldn't I want to get involved in that game? Sure, let's do this. And then you show up and you're like, we're going to invest this character with this sort of semi-tragic backstory. She's obviously damaged, but she's also a good person. And she can see this person is in turmoil. And she assumes it's more like I'll help you limp back to your car and I'll never see you again, but there's just something intriguing about him, and it builds and builds and builds. But because of the mechanics of the plot, you just kind of have to forget about her to constantly go back to Will's need to rise, regain his throne at the publishing company.
Right.
And she gets lost in the shuffle.
Until she is in danger and has to be saved at the end.
Yes. And it would have been nice in that circumstance. I also feel this is where the Mike Nichols of it has problems, because we've seen various directors over the years of talking about various horror movies who have trouble communicating a fight. It's hard to do. It seems simple, but oh my God, it is really difficult to make action on screen read well. And as much as I love leaping, and I do, I'm a leaping fan. This movie is kind of like, did you like that leap? How about 10 more of them? And you're like, are we gonna have some slashing? Is someone gonna bite somebody? What's the step up here? And it's like, whoa. This time he's going to leap with something in his hands. Come on. Give me something but leaping. And it falls a little short there because I'm not sure he knows how to make that crackle. It's not, not everyone's perfect. And there's a lot of right in this movie, but that's the part for me that, in addition to the Michelle Pfeiffer, is a little bit wrong. Just because no one figured out how to make the action element of this. If you're not going to go for gore, you might as well give me action, and it can't quite find the punch to land there.
I think part of that is also just the time it was made.
Yeah.
Because when you look at, like, the thing is, at the end of this movie, the final battle, it's as much as it's like a double werewolf battle, it's also kind of like an earlier version of a superhero battle. It's two superpowered people, like with like enhanced strength and agility fighting.
Yeah.
And that was a thing that, I mean, it's not that dissimilar from like the fight at the end of Superman 2.
Sure.
When you've got people on wires and they'll hit each other and they'll like fly really far and stuff like that. Like it took a while for like this. I do not want this movie to have a bunch of CGI on it, but
Sure.
I feel like it kind of took at least until like The Matrix for Hollywood to figure out like, okay, how do we like effectively like communicate like superpowers or like enhanced physical abilities properly on screen.
There wasn't quite the film language to make this happen at the time, and
also I also don't know that Mike Nichols was ever really an action director.
No. But
No.
he's a skilled visual director. It's like he's not flashy, but
it's an engagingly shot scene. It's just it's mostly just them jumping at each other.
Spader, gets shot, and that's how he dies. But I do love the move that he picks up the gardening shears and holds them over his head and then leaps, because he's going for a pretty killer finishing move.
Yes, he's going for a flying The Burning. Right at Jack Nicolson.
Yes. And one thing that I do really like in that scene is just the cross cutting. But when Nicholson or Will Randall is still like behind the bars in like the horse stable, and he's trying to get out, and just like the cutting from like him like fighting at the bars to the horses freaking out back to Spader and Pfeiffer, like that there's some effective cutting there. And I think because it's kind of like it's the third time that the horses freaking out has appeared, so it's kind of a nice like they like planted that early on, and now to build up the suspense and the frenzy of the scene, I think that's some really effective filmmaking.
I think part of the difficulty here is you have two people, like as you said, who have the same basic superpowers. So how do you demonstrate how one is better at it than the other one when we haven't seen them demonstrate anything other than the leaping at other places in the movie? I mean, we mentioned a little bit earlier, but David Schwimmer arrives in his most fetal form as a New York City cop when Jack Nicholson decides to go to the Central Park Zoo and just look at some animals, as you do. Weirdly enough, this is now my second movie in as many weeks about wolves hanging out at the Central Park Zoo.
Wait, what was the other one?
Wolfen with Albert Finney.
I've never seen that one.
It's interesting.
It's another one that is trying to be a classy horror movie.
Yeah,
but it's way gorier. There's a lot of killing. And
there's a lot of flying hands holding guns. That's the wolf's main move in that one. It's like, you got a gun, I'm going to take your whole hand. And then you get to see it fly
nice
across the screen. And you get wolf vision, in which we get to see Albert Finney totally giving it right proper to a lady through wolf vision. And
really?
Oh, there's nothing better. It's amongst the several films of 1981 that are in a special genre I like to call Albert Finney is supposed to be American, and he's not very good at it, but the American part. But yeah, it's a weird movie. Super weird.
I gotta see it.
You at least have to see it for the New York that it captures at the time, because
New York at its shittiest. It looks like London after the Blitz.
Beautiful.
Yeah, they talked at the time that they had built this ramshackle, destroyed church, and it was the first thing that had been built in the Queens, in that area of Queens, for like 25 years. It's like, yay, we built something. You built something that looks like everything else, and it's horrible. And you built it so you could find dead bodies with heads with maggots coming out of them at one point.
Wow.
and the wolves imitate babies to lure in their prey.
Okay, I am sold.
You also have to see Edward James Olmos' penis, though.
Oh yeah, you get a lot of Edward James Olmos wang in that.
Full frontal EGO?
It's like a glimpse. It's shot like in moonlight, but it's there. It's there.
Oh, it's very there. You can't hide it. He's starkers.
You had no idea you were going to talk about Edward James Olmos' penis when you agreed to be on this episode. Did
I gotta say, if you'd asked me ahead of time if I thought this would come up, I would have just given you a resounding no.
That's the kind of swings we take here at Kill by Kill.
Wow, love it.
Can we talk a little bit about Jack Nicholson's werewolf technique? At one point, he smells his wife's robe, catches the scent of something he doesn't like, and decides to run through the streets. And I can only describe this in one way. He looks like Bluto when he's in stealth mode in Animal House.
Yes.
His shoulders don't move.
I think that was the moment when I was like, oh, wait, I am really into this movie. Because it's so strange. He's just like hunched.
Yeah.
And the great part about it is he's running, like, I think he lives on the Upper West Side, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And he's just running by like regular people who like live in the area. And one thing that I have to point out that I love about this movie is that this has always been a thing with Jack Nicholson, where Jack Nicholson in every single role exudes this like extreme confidence. Mm-hmm. And it's like he like even like in like terms of endearment, where he's got like his belly just hanging out, he still manages to be like a sex symbol in that, like because of just like his vibe and his total confidence with everything about himself. And I love that he did not like he's kind of schlubby in this movie. He does not, despite the fact that he's going to be running around and leaping and bounding and all of this stuff, he didn't like get in great shape.
Yeah.
And so he's just like mid-50s kind of schlubby Jack Nicholson in a not flattering coat and khakis, just animalistically just running around like the sidewalks of the Upper West Side on the prowl. And
nobody looking at him because, you know, New York.
Yeah, but he's just jogging or whatever. And it's such a strange image that was the moment when I went from like, this is interesting to, oh, I am on board with this movie. And then he bounds up a stairs on all fours and bites James Spader's hand. And so I'm like, perfect. Like I'm so in movie. I will follow you anywhere.
I mean, I love that at one point in this movie, we watch him stalk a deer in corduroys.
Yes.
Like no other movie sort of has this crazy mix of a guy who just has a corporate job who happens to become a werewolf. It's as you said earlier, it would never be made today, and it probably wouldn't have been made many years past when it was actually made. It's a miracle it happened when it did.
Yeah. I mean, like my whole, like the reason I think it happened then is, and I feel like I apologize for constantly bringing up this video that I just made, but that's the reason I watched this movie, is that it fell during this time when Sony Pictures was basically trying to do like prestige reboots of the various Universal monsters.
Yeah.
And I believe this screenplay had existed since like the 80s. And so I think they just wanted to make a werewolf movie because they didn't own the rights to the Wolfman, but they could still make a werewolf movie. And they had this. Yeah. And Nicholson was interested. So they're like, great. We did Dracula. We did Frankenstein. We got to do a werewolf now. So how about this one?
Yeah, I do wonder what their Invisible Man and Phantom of the Opera would have been.
I mean, they did make Hollow Man. But that was 2000. And because this all happened during the period of time when John Peters and Peter Guber were running Sony.
Sure.
And I think they had both left by 95. And they greenlit all like this wave of like sort of like classy prestige horror movies. And so Hollow Man got made under like a different regime. But yeah, I wonder if they would have made something like that, or if they would have I mean, like, honestly, Hollow Man is probably too trashy. They probably,
Sure.
you know, they probably would have been like, oh my God, who would have been an appropriate director? Like, I don't know, let's get like Sidney Pollack to make an Invisible Man movie.
Where he uses his abilities mostly to look at naked ladies.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Or, like, what was Wolfgang Petersen's, Hunchback of Notre Dame going to be?
Exactly.
And I also think the thing that really closes it out is you have this sort of weird period where horror doesn't quite know what it wants to be here, because the slasher boom has drowned out, and you have some classier things happening. Certainly, Candyman is right up in there where it goes super gothic, and you have that Bram Stoker's Dracula where they're pouring money into it to make this grand affair. And it all just kind of happens in this little bubble. And then in December of 1996, when Scream comes out, everything changes. It's just like, it's a line in the sand. And nothing, the tone of the 90s for horror immediately becomes something like Scream.
Right. And then it's wild because then 3 years later, you get The Sixth Sense.
Yeah.
And that actually gets like a Best Picture nomination at the Oscars.
Yeah.
And so
it's just a weird period. It's just it's so odd.
It's
Yeah,
really
and they would not try to. I mean, I may be forgetting one, but I don't think I am. They would not try another big budget werewolf movie until the 2000s with The Werewolf, which was the one with Anthony Hopkins and Benicio Toro.
The Wolfman, yeah.
The Wolfman, yeah.
Which is a lot like Mask of Zorro, but with werewolves.
And that was
Right.
that was done without any sort of humor, very, very straightforward, very tragic. But, it's not, for some reason, Hollywood loves vampires. Werewolves can fuck right off.
I think because it's hard the longer you look at it, the harder it is for your mind to go, that's a wolf man. And CGI wolf people look terrible.
Oh,
They always do.
Yeah, I mean, they look like they're melting. They
Yeah.
look like they're melting.
I think part of the problem with Hollywood and werewolves, especially trying to do ones that are, I don't know, like I hate to say classier, but ones that aren't just because like I love just like ultra violent like schlocky trash, but ones that are not trying to do that, but are trying to have like slightly higher aspirations. I think the tricky thing, at least for like the people making them, is that unlike vampires, werewolves don't talk, and so for like the performer, I feel like the feeling might be they don't have as much to do once the person becomes a werewolf, because then it's largely effects, and they are an animal and they're not as much of a character. And so it kind of gets like, while like vampires can be classy and romantic, I feel like werewolves kind of get lumped into just like, oh, it's a rampaging monster that just like runs around and eats things.
It's a Godzilla, It's just one of those things, like, as long as you're not in its path, you're probably not in danger. Whereas a vampire will fixate on a victim and, toy with their soul and, seduce them. There's no seduction when it comes to werewolves necessarily. You got two lanes. You either stick with the person becoming a werewolf, or you stick with the person who's aware that werewolves might be possible, and they're just trying not to be turned into one or eaten by one. You have The Howling, or you have American Werewolf in London, and those are your post 1980 lanes.
Yeah, thinking now, so this movie gets a little bit into the mythology of werewolves.
Yes, when we meet the doctor who lives in an apartment straight out of Seven for some reason.
Yeah, with just a great red light bulb right at the entrance.
Just cause, I don't know, maybe it's cold there. I don't know what it is, but he's gelled that light, for funsies.
It is interesting because this movie is shot very, in like, for a movie that is ostensibly a horror movie, it's not shot like a horror movie. No. It's shot like just a big budget Hollywood drama. just like high key lighting, like everyone is lit very like glossily and very nicely, and you know, nothing like none of the lighting or is really exaggerated or anything like that, and none of it plays into like what we think of as like horror movie lighting. And then suddenly you get to the scene and it's just full red. It's just Jack Nicholson just walks into this room and is just like drenched in red light, and it's just, and it does kind of, and it's interesting because he has to walk through the red light, so it's kind of like it represents like the shift in the movie, like we're taking a step into new territory.
Yeah, it's almost like there's a denial of supernatural up until that point. Like,
right,
maybe this incident just shook him out of, as Gina said, that depression state that he was in. And now that he's sort of had this momentary flash of his own mortality, he's just going to, you know, fuck it. I'm going to pull myself together. I'm actually going to fight for this job. I'm going to fight for this. Until that moment when he walks into that room and that guy's like, so you're probably going to turn into a wolf next full moon. So plan on it. If you got a calendar, write it down. And also, if you could bite me on your way out, I'd really appreciate it.
That's Jack the part Nicholson's I love.
Like, no thanks.
It's kind of sad.
Yeah, it really is. It's a very somber note to leave the scene on.
Yeah.
Like, I gave you this, like, I'm going to give you this thing that's going to help you not turn into a werewolf. Great, thanks. Can I give you anything in, you know, for that? It's like, oh, nothing monetarily, but, you know, bite my hand. Come on. Come on. Choo-choo. Right up on there. And he won't do it.
He won't do it.
I mean, honestly, of all the things that you're gonna, you know, if you want to live an immortal life again, why wouldn't you just become a vampire?
Yeah, well, this movie needs a spare vampire, just one flitting in through the background who just happens to.
Well, I mean, it would be great if, like, you know, after there was an after credit sequence where like Count Dracula shows up and starts getting the band back together.
Look, it's not too late to make this a part of the Dark Universe.
Yeah, no, I think you're
like
right. But
85-year-old Jack Nicholson showing up as a werewolf.
Exactly. Look, hey, Spader's still going strong, and Pfeiffer.
Hey, Michelle Pfeiffer looks magnificent. She was in.
You go straight for Pfeiffer, and you just have what's his face from The Mummy, who
Russell Crowe,
from Russell Crowe, show up. You know, in that castle going, oh, you're a wolf now? You thought you were the only one? You're not.
Exactly. And then cast some hot movie star who's like 30 years old as her daughter, who's now maybe inherited wolf genes.
Yeah. So
we can like keep this franchise going. Like, okay, my thing with the Dark Universe is I think they should basically just say every single monster movie is canon. Just to say, you know what, all of those, they were just all in this universe and they all count now.
Yeah. They're barely connected within the framework of what they are.
Right.
So why worry about it? Just like show up and give me a new werewolf. Show up and give me a new Dracula. I'm all for it.
Apparently, Ryan Gosling is gonna be the Wolfman.
Yeah, and Karen Kusama is gonna do Dracula.
Can't wait.
So I'm first in line for that one.
So one thing I'm curious about is, in terms of the werewolf mythology of this movie, this is not like a monthly thing where it's like, oh, every month, full moon, he's gonna be a wolf. This is just like every night, he's gonna be a wolf.
No, it just builds over time.
Yeah,
and it's like a water slide. Once you get on it, the only end is you becoming a full-born wolf and stalking Vermont.
Which means it's a little bit like closer to like The Fly. It's more like an ongoing transformation rather than just like a periodic thing that you have to worry about like every 30 days.
Yeah, and that's what a lot of people compared it to at the time. Ebert brings up The Fly in his review.
Okay.
Where he doesn't really cast it in the best light of it not being The Fly, but it's not every movie's fault they're not David fucking Cronenberg's The Fly, because that's an amazing movie. It's just how you can't go up to the bat and knock out the fly every day. So it's a bit unfair, but I see the comparison because he's just turning into this monster. There's a kind of plan that maybe you could get out of it, but not really. He's just, you get on the slide and at the end, you're in Wolf Town, baby.
I mean, I personally would have liked it to maybe go a little bleak and have, you could still end with her turning into a werewolf, but maybe him just getting killed saving her. I think I don't know, the weird sort of, and now we can go up and be wolves together. That was sort of like a weird happy ending to me.
Yeah, they like each other, but an eternity being wolves together, that's a big commitment. They've slept together once. Like, let's pump the brakes here a little bit.
I mean, but that's also how Hollywood works. People meet and then that's it. It doesn't matter how long they've known each other. Just immediately they are good together for the rest of their lives.
I would be remiss if we didn't bring up, and we touched on him just a little bit, but we really haven't talked about Christopher Plummer going full Captain Von Trapp here.
Yes.
As a disapproving father of a clearly adult daughter, just having any relationship with the dude. He's like, nope, don't like it, don't like him, kind of don't like you, don't want any part of it. And he's just disapproving from moment one. He's kind of fantastic, just flitting about in this movie. Just, I'm here, but I'm not in a werewolf movie.
It's like they didn't need. I mean, I think this is the kind of thing that explains why it costs so much money, because like this is a role that doesn't need Christopher Plummer.
Yeah.
No.
There's not the purpose of this role is mostly it's like there's like the scene where he tells him that he's being demoted, that he wants him to take care of like Eastern European accounts. And then he just kind of pops up every now and again. He has no like big scene.
No.
But just like, I'm not saying anyone could play it, but they could have gotten someone who was a hell of a lot cheaper, and I'm sure it would be fine. But having Plummer just elevates the whole thing.
I mean, it's really worth it for the end where he looks at Michelle Pfeiffer and he almost like it's like that moment in a teen comedy where they take the glasses off the nerdy girl, and he's like, "Well, look at you. Well, when did you become so wolfy?"
I could totally buy that he had no idea he was in a werewolf movie. that he came in, he did his scenes, he went home, he went to the premiere. I was like, what?
I mean, as we know from like the making of All the Money in the World, Christopher Plummer is a professional.
Yes.
Doesn't matter how old he is, he will come in like at a moment's notice, get the job done, deliver what you need. He's great.
Every dollar of that paycheck is something he's going to earn. And of course, the thing that I really needed you here to talk about is the scene in which Michelle Pfeiffer feeds Jack Nicholson a peanut butter and jelly sandwich at a kitchen with a candelabra on it with wax melted off of it. Like it's like they're eating in the Phantom of the Opera's lair.
It's incredible. And the scene begins with a close-up of a jar of Jif. And
I never thought I would see either of those people, these huge movie stars, chomp their way through a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and have it, you can tell that's peanut butter because they're having trouble talking.
Yes, I'm watching it right now as we're talking. I again, there's no way of knowing, but I'm going to throw this out that this is an Elaine May edition. But like, I think it's actually some really nice, subtle character development because they establish that she's this person who has this like past history of like drug abuse and like bad relationships. Like basically, she does not have her life together.
Yeah.
She's just. Her father is clearly disappointed with her and is like allowing her to live in this like ornate guest house on the property. And she's a person who's not good at taking care of herself. And so when they're hanging out and talking, and so I think it makes perfect sense for her not to even have like a well-stocked refrigerator. This is all she has, and she's like in her early to mid 30s. And at this point also, as like, you know, Nicholson is having these like changes in his life, and he's sort of, I guess, opening up to new experiences. And I think it's and it's not like peanut butter and jelly is a new experience, but I think it does say something about him that he is like so happy to just like eat a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Like,
yeah, there's
sure.
no trappings here. There's no, he doesn't have to fulfill a specific role. He's just reduced to having a basic sandwich with another person and trying in some way to connect to them and finding difficulty in that. There's a realness in that scene that's slightly undercut by a wax dripping candelabra taking up the majority of the frame.
In a way, just that one frame kind of tells you, it's like the whole movie in a single frame. You have like the sort of ornate gothic horror smashed alongside the 90s just like modernity with like Jif peanut butter.
It's just urbane. This whole thing is urbane horror, and I can't think of too many movies that touch on this specific vein of it. A couple other things right before I think we wrap things up. We talked briefly about the doctor who gives Jack Nicholson all the mystical knowledge. He's a mystical knowledge machine in the movie. And his character name is Dr. Alexeus. And all I could think of when they said it was the Simpsons parody of Stop the Planet of the Apes, I Want to Get Off. Dr. Alexeus. At one point, Jack Nicholson stalks Central Park and is accosted by 3 thugs, street toughs. And I just desperately wanted him to then run into Mrs. 45 in full nun regalia and Charles Bronson. If they could all be in the same movie, that's an Avengers for me.
That scene where, you know, he rips off a guy's fingers.
Yeah, and keeps them around.
Yeah, I feel like the moment when he discovers the fingers are in his pocket is pretty much like the goriest this gets.
Yeah, that's the most blood, really. You know, he's got a bit of deer gore on his face, but this is the most violence in the movie, is a couple of fingers in a hanky.
Right. It's a great, like, darkly comedic gag, just discovering that in like his suit pocket he just has a man's fingers. I laughed.
Yeah, no, oh my god, there's so many great little laugh lines in here. There's one where the 2 cops are talking about how there are now 5 dead bodies in Central Park, and one of the cops says to Richard Jenkins, "What is it about a full moon?" And Richard Jenkins replies, "More light."
I mean, is he wrong?
No, he's not wrong. It's just, I feel like that's too good of a lie. There are so many of those in this movie. People really need to watch it for that stuff. Like, there's a lot in here. There are lots of nuggets to grab onto.
By the way, I just remembered that Richard Jenkins is also in The Witches of Eastwick. So this is like a 3-way reunion.
That's true. They're getting the gang back together, baby.
Yeah.
If only Cher could have played his wife. That would have put it over the top.
That would be wild.
Oh my god.
I mean, if we're saying that like Michelle Pfeiffer is kind of like overqualified for her role, Cher would be so overqualified for that role.
You mean like that's all Cher gets to do? But Cher's like, you know what? I had a couple months. I was in New York City, so I made it happen.
Exactly.
Yeah. And yeah, I think that's about it. But before we go, we have a little tradition here. We like to play a game called Choose Your Own Deathventure. And that is where, of the deaths portrayed in this movie, if you were forced to die in one of those ways, which one would you choose for yourself and why? Up for bid, you could have your fingers bitten off and I think the rest of you eaten.
I hate to cut you off, but I think they established that guy did not die.
Oh, did?
Yeah, no, there was like a scene where the mother correctly says, you know, and regrettably it has not changed. If this was a white boy that got his fingers bitten off, the police would be all over this. And you know what? She's absolutely right, and that would still be the case now.
Yes. Not much has changed, unfortunately.
Yeah.
No, I don't think I don't think he kills anybody. He doesn't even kill James Spader.
Well, but the mauling. But there's two guys. Like the guy who gets his fingers bitten off runs away, and the two other guys, we don't see what happens to them.
I don't know. I don't think he ever kills anyone. Because I think that's the whole point, is that he's not quite bad enough to actually kill anybody.
Yeah, he's like defending himself, but
whereas James Spader just gleefully running people over, ripping out throats left and right. He's having the time of his life.
I'm not saying in court he wouldn't get off on justifiable werewolfing.
Yeah.
You get the right lawyer, I think you could make this fly. So basically, then it comes down to you either have your throat ripped out in Central Park like Jack Nicholson's wife. You get run over through a gate, like character actor Peter Garrity, who shows up here for 5 seconds. You get your throat ripped out on the grounds. So basically, we have 2 throat rippings. Or you get shot in mid-flying the burning, like James Spader. So... Mr. Willems, as our guest, I turn to you for your answer first.
I am going to choose getting shot mid-leap. Because it seems like the quickest of all these deaths. That's really what it comes down to. Well, okay, actually, there's 2 components to it.
Sure.
It is both the quickest and the awesomest. Because having your throat ripped out seems deeply unpleasant.
Yeah.
Like I don't even like thinking about that. That just seems awful. Getting run over, I feel like that guy probably took a few minutes to die.
Yeah.
Afterwards.
Yeah.
That seems like a shitty way to go. But Spader clearly dies pretty quickly. And I think what's important is that he gets shot while leaping like 15 feet in the air, wielding a pair of gardening shears over his head as a weapon. Mm-hmm. And that's a pretty cool way to go.
Sure.
Getting killed mid-leap. So I'm going to go with that.
Okay. I'm not going to say it's wrong. Now, you will have to sort of change your signature attire from that sort of French sailor look T-shirt into gray sweatshirts, which I feel like is not necessarily your look. Are you going to be okay with that?
There are worse outfits to die in.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if anyone else who gets killed is like, look, I mean, I don't really want to be wearing the uniform for like the guy at the gate. So
I don't know. It's a nice snappy green affair. It's,
true. But yeah, I mean, if you're applying clothing to this, then do I also get to be in wolf mode? Because that seems cool.
Yes, but you won't be found in wolf mode because after you die face down in the pool, your hands go back to normal.
You know what? That's true, but I'm sticking with this answer.
All right. I'm not going to argue any further. It's locked and it's in. Gina, what say you?
Gosh, I don't know. What was the security? Tom was the guy who got his throat ripped out?
Yes.
I'm gonna say Tom. He looks like he went pretty fast. I had the same. I agree. I usually tend to take the quickest death. Mm-hmm. So that one seems like your lights are going out pretty fast.
Yeah, I think probably I'm gonna go out like Kate Nelligan, and here's my rationale. At least I will have gotten to finally sleep with James Spader. And so I'll get that checked off of my list, and then I can go. Not on camera, not in a flashy way. Richard Jenkins tells you about it after the fact when you're all wet from the shower.
Oh yeah, he looks like Ted Stryker in an airplane during that scene, just like liquid just pouring down his face.
Like the shower hasn't stopped. He's still as wet as he was in the shower. It's crazy the amount of liquid he's transferred with him to this conversation. They just must have thrown a bucket over top of him before they started rolling the camera every scene.
I feel like that's part of Nicholson's vibe. He usually seems like a guy who's been sweating a lot.
Yeah, he usually comes off as very, very damp.
Yeah. Now, even during a Lakers game sometimes, it's like, ooh, you don't need that many layers, Jack. You're fine. It's kind of hot down there on the floor with all those lights and everything, but no, he doesn't worry about it. That's why he's Jack Nicholson and I just sweat in my office. So that pretty much rounds everything out. Before we go, Patrick, why don't you tell everyone where they can find and hear more about you and what you do?
Okay. Well, I feel like the immediate obvious thing to point to, because I've brought it up a bunch on this episode, my latest video, which is called The 90s Dark Universe, which is the video that I watched Wolf for, which touches on a lot of the stuff that we've talked about in this episode. Check that out. It's over at my YouTube channel, Patrick H. Willems, or youtube.com/Patrick H. Willems. No one else on YouTube has that name. It's easy to find. Lots of videos where I talk at length about movies. Yeah, that's the main thing to plug. Check it out.
Yes, I implore everyone to do it. I think you're fantastic at what you do. There's a certain cadre of people who are that you are in league with that I think have an air of cinema positivity about what you talk about, and you're everything that's right about movie YouTube.
Wow, thank you.
I honestly believe that, and I think you have contemporaries there, and Mikey, and I won't name everyone because I'll leave somebody out, but I think there's a lot of good on movie YouTube, and I think you typify that.
Well, thank you. I try my best to do that, and Mikey, who you mentioned, is one of my favorites, and he's always killing it.
Yes. All right, Gina, where can people find you on these here internets?
I write for The Spool. I review television and movies. I have my own website, which I am restarting at ginaradcliffe.com, and I am on Twitter under Porcelain72.
Do it today, people. Check it out. Of course, you can find us on Twitter and our Facebook group, and we're on Instagram as well. Rate and review us on iTunes. It helps us be seen and heard by more people. We really appreciate it when you take time out of your life to do that for us. And that just about does it. I don't know what we're going to be doing next. It's a great mystery. Who knows what it will be? It will not be something as classy as this. I'll tell you that.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Straight garbage.
Straight garbage. However, at this point, we will have begun our expedition of Hannibal, the television series, in our side podcast called Dish by Dish, where we go through each episode of Hannibal one dish at a time. And so please check us out there on our Kill by Kill off weeks. That just about does it for us. So for myself, for Gina, for the second Patrick on this podcast, bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Yeah. I mean,
it's also sorry, Patrick, go ahead.
That's pretty much all I was saying. Just I love everything Spader is doing
because we're both Patrick.
That's true.